Well, welcome to this week's Parable Essentials. My name's Peter Toggs. My wife and I are the lead pastors of Parable Church, and it's a pleasure to be hosting this podcast episode today with you. Listen, do us a favor. If you love this, if this has blessed you, equipped you, lifted your head a little bit high, feel free to like it, subscribe it, or share it. We would be so grateful. I'm excited about today's episode because it's with one of my good friends, someone I admire, someone I love, and a blessing to us personally, but to our church at Parable, and no doubt is pioneering with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to my good friend, John Smallwood.
Yay.
John, how good to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. And I think that's my favorite introduction for a podcast or anything like that so far.
Oh,
So
good.
thank you.
I like
Yes,
that.
thank you.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yes, you are one worth introductions. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would have taken a little bit longer with the introduction and introduced you. Well, I'm going to introduce you now, actually, because you are one man, obviously, with many talents, many gifts. But one of the things you do, no doubt, he's part of our ministry team. He's part of, our pastoral team. He does it all, ladies and gentlemen, him and his wife, Louise,
Yes.
who I can't wait to chat to. And we're going to have, no doubt, on this podcast. But you are also, when it just comes to your vocational life, you're a life or leadership. I almost did that. You're a leadership coach.
Yes.
Not a life coach. What's the difference?
So we would describe ourselves, so both Louise and I are coaches, we would describe ourselves as leadership coaches, primarily because that's the area that we work in.
Right.
We would consider leadership, actually we consider leadership and influence to be interchangeable. So we work with people who are key influencers in organizations or in leadership roles or want to be in leadership roles. And an element of that is life coaching. So when we say we're not life coaches, life coaching is one part of what we would do, but it's not who we would describe ourselves as. Yeah.
Wow. I'm keen to unpack that with you a little bit more, but it is a pleasure to have you on today's podcast, and I know you're going to help a lot of people. But I want to say, first of all, from our church and Laura and I, we're so thankful for you and Louise for what you guys contribute, who you guys are. You've been with us pretty much since day one, as many other team who may be watching and listening on have been. But you guys have we have just felt your unwavering, support. And I know, whilst you're a part of our team, Laura and I just feel like we can lean on you guys just personally as well. I know we catch up fortnightly, although I need to get better with my calendar. Maybe that's something you can coach me on right now. But we try to catch up regularly. And, because I think what comes with leadership is a lot of weight. And, whether you're a CEO or whether you are a pastor, whether you're a mum or a dad, we're all kind of leading something. And I think sometimes all of us feel some sort of weight to that, hey?
Yeah.
And so having people like you in our lives is just amazing. But just real quick, let's do a little flyover. Just how did you come to know God? Like your salvation journey? Have you grown up in church? Because wait, I hear a bit of an accent there.
Yes.
And so everyone can hear an accent. Where are you originally from?
So it always ends up being a longer conversation than the question would, allude to. So I was actually born in England.
Right.
And then I was brought up in Dublin, which is the accent, primarily a Dublin accent. So interesting you ask about church. I was
Dublin's in
Ireland. In the south of Ireland. So Ireland.
Wow.
So I was brought up there. Interesting time to be brought up in Ireland as well, because it was during the conflicts that were happening in Northern Ireland at the time.
Oh,
so
wow.
Actually quite interesting being a kid with initially with an English accent, being brought up in we would have called it political time, to be in Dublin. Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Because
the conflict in Northern Ireland was on our doorstep. So we were dealing with the whole Catholic Protestant conversation at the time. And interesting for me, my dad passed away now, was Church of England, and my mum Roman Catholic or Catholic.
What was that like growing up in a household like that?
Well, it was normal for us.
Sure.
But we were pretty familiar with both, if that makes sense. So I was, um, we were brought up as Catholics. So went to Catholic schools. You know, we went to church on Sunday. I was an altar boy when I was like very, very young. I mean, preschool, I would have been an altar boy.
Wow. Did you do any of the singing like that altar boys can do? You know,
Yeah, we
they,
did.
they're amazing.
We didn't necessarily do that singing, but I was brought up in the Latin Mass.
Sure.
So you know, I learned Latin as a very young kid.
Do you still know
some
any Latin?
I know little bits of it. Now it's actually interesting because I'm actually learning Spanish at the moment, and it's helpful to understand.
Okay, give us
some of
something
the
for our
words.
Spanish audience. Come on.
Like what in Spanish?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, ¿cómo estás? Which you probably know.
Yes,
That's
yes.
quite
¿Cómo
easy,
estás?
yeah,
We've got a massive audience in Spain, so
we've got a massive.
we don't.
We've actually got quite a healthy Spanish-speaking community in our church.
We do.
Yeah,
We
really
do.
do.
Yeah.
Really do, and they're.
Passionate
I
people.
love hanging out with
Same
them.
here.
They're,
I love
they're
them.
very polite. They stop speaking Spanish when I'm around. So
They're passionate folks. So, okay, so you grow up in a kind of Catholic and then Church of England. How did you come to know Jesus for yourself? How did you come to be a part of church as we know it today?
yeah, today. So look, in my early 20s, I definitely distanced myself from church and anything church related. I was definitely for about, I'd say, more than 10 years. I was out there, you know, very much like the prodigal son. I think I was partying to some extent and having what I considered to be, and I use the inverted commas, a good time for quite a few years. And it wasn't really until about 15, 16 years ago now that we come back from Australia. We traveled, we've been all around the world. So Louise and we've lived abroad. We lived in Asia for a while. Naturally, I lived in the UK and worked across Europe and whatever. But when we came back to Australia, I think it was around 2007, 2008, we were both saved within weeks or days of each other, not entirely sure, at the same tiny little church on the northern beaches. So
Wow.
yeah, and it was we were actually going through a really tough time. We're just coming up for our 25th wedding anniversary. Actually, next
Beautiful.
week. I think it's next week, the week after next. So we're just coming up for our 25th wedding anniversary, and at that time we were going through a real crossroads in our marriage. So it was yeah, quite incredible.
Wow. You know what I've always admired about you guys is just your passion and love for the local church.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've heard little bits and pieces of your story. You know, you were youth pastors, you were this and that, and you've served at so many different levels of church life.
Yeah.
But where does this passion for the local church, because how do you keep this as you've become more seasoned, because we don't
Yeah.
age, but we become more
Thank you.
seasoned. How have you maintained this passion for the local church all these
Yeah.
years later?
I think it's got to do with we recognize the importance of the local church in the community because and I say I'm really clear that if it wasn't for the local church and the care that the local church showed to us, they loved on us. They stayed in communication with us, and they weren't. If you were to look at it from the outside, you would say they weren't our people. As in, they didn't look like the kind of people we would hang out with or socialize with. But they loved on us, they encouraged us, they were patient with us. And that's what made all the difference. And I think that it doesn't make any difference how physically big you are in terms of a church. It's important that you are a local church and that people relate to you inside the community. You're a part of that community.
Yeah.
And we know this. We're an integral part of the community. So yes, I'm passionate for not only for our church, local church, but for any church being the local church.
I think that's so good because, and I think it's what we're, endeavoring to build at Parable is, a place that feels like home.
Yeah.
And something I've always said is we aren't just created for community, we're created to create community. And
Yes.
I love that's what you share about, care and community, because every single human is looking for a place to belong, you know.
Yeah.
And I think what better place than Christ's bride, the
Yes.
church. What do you think it is sometimes that turns people off from church? I mean, okay, let's rewind.
Yeah.
Last 5 years,
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah.
You know, people for whatever reason, you know, there's the statistics out there of that, you know, those that returned to church and
Yeah.
those that didn't. Some were like, you know, I'm pretty good without, you know, coming on a Sunday.
Yeah.
In your observations, what do you think it was? Is there anything that
I
you can
think
tell us?
it's the being connected and in such a way that you're kind of plugged in. You know, when you plug in the TV into the socket, it's not lying on the floor, it's actually plugged in. I think it's really important to be plugged in.
So true.
And if you're not plugged in, then of course it's easy to drift away when, you know, even people will go away, for example, go overseas or something like that, and they're away for a few weeks, and they're because they're not connected, because they're not plugged in, it's easy to drift away. And it's one of the things that we do really well is, and it's a work in progress, right? Is finding opportunities for people to connect, whether it be in serving or in groups or, you know, different areas, because we've all got different talents. So, you know, you're talking about giftings. It's quite interesting. I think that the natural giftings that we have show up in church sometimes because they're not necessarily what you're doing in your career.
Wow.
So we all get that opportunity to express that.
So true. The good news is, fast forward 5 years, it is great to see people returning to church.
Yes.
And I feel like in a lot of local churches, the tide's rising, you know, which means all boats rise with the tide. And I love that because I think everyone should find a church, wherever you're watching this from, that you love, one that declares the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And I think God wants to show different sides of himself. And so I'm a big believer in the local church and the body of Christ at large.
Yeah.
And I hope that the church, as we move forward into the future, that, you know, it's not territorial, it's not about my church, your church, but Christ is coming back for his bride.
Yes.
And his bride is diverse, it's large, it's wide. And so I love what you say about church, about that, you know, that connectedness and whatnot. But let's talk a little bit about leadership. I always have to correct myself. Leadership coaching. What is some things that you work with a lot of CEOs, pastors, leaders, high level executive leadership. So I'm glad to be talking to you today because what are some things, that challenges that you have seen in high level leadership, and how do you address that? Could you name 3 or 4 things?
Ooh, I could name 3 or 4 things. Yes, I think some of the common challenges, if I put them across the board, I think confidence is a big one. Wow. I think confidence is an area that, and it's interesting because we look at people who are in those high level positions, we naturally look at them and think they must be so confident, you know, or even, you know, I find myself I look at you sometimes on a Sunday and say, wow, you know, you're up there, you're preaching, you know, every Sunday or whatever. And I go, yeah, how confident do you need to be to do that? And then what we find is that a lot of people are really dealing with or challenged around confidence. Wow. And it's interesting where they look for it. You know, they look for, you know, how do I improve or increase my confidence? That's one area. And I think it's the other thing that's a common theme is it can be quite lonely. Yeah. You know, and we hear this about you know, especially in the higher positions, that the higher up somebody is in an organization or in a business, that they have, or they find that they have less people to, you know, check in with, or less peers in that space, or less people that they can communicate with, or the less concerns that they can express. So, yeah.
It's interesting you say that because, like, that's something I hear a lot, you know, it's lonely at the top, whatever the top is, you know, so to speak. But I'm a big believer in that it doesn't need to be lonely at the top. And look, I think it's lonely in the sense of, as a pastor, as a lead pastor of a church, okay, you are accountable before God. I carry that with such weight. You know, I'm held accountable to the people that we shepherd, and I'm held accountable to a governance and a board. But more than that, to God. I think I feel the weight of that, and no one else will probably feel the weight of that.
Yeah.
But I think it is lonely at the top. Yeah, you're accountable. The buck stops with you. So there is a sense of loneliness, but I don't think it has to be lonely at the
Yeah,
top.
I
Would you
agree.
agree in the sense, I think more than ever, if you are lonely, if you're a leader that's lonely, I think you are vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think you're an easy target. But what do you think it is? Why do people say that? Why is that a common theme that I hear in leadership circles?
I think I'll say one thing first of all, and I think both you and Laura, I think you're practiced at surrounding yourself with people who you can confidence, or people who you can share things with, and not necessarily in the immediate circle. There'll be people outside that who you can go to. Yeah, and I think you guys are. It's a practice. It's something that you've developed over time. You can see it, right?
Right. Something you've had to be intentional about.
Yes,
as well.
absolutely intentional about it, because I think what happens as people, they move into leadership roles, there is a degree of separation between you and for example, if it's in an organization, maybe people who report to you.
Sure.
So some of the conversations that you have, or some of the those decisions that you may be making and you're seeking advice from, it's difficult for you to seek advice from people who may report to you. Wow. So it gets narrower and narrower, but I think it's a really healthy thing. And like you said, intentional, I think, is the key word to take out of that, is being intentional about having people around you who you can not only communicate with, but sometimes you just want to process things. Yeah, you just want to say stuff to get it out of your own head.
It's and I love that you said that, because I know for me, as I've matured and hopefully grown in my leadership, I've realized, man, I need spaces to let the steam off, a little bit. And you do have to be, you do have to apply wisdom with who that is, right?
Yes.
And thankfully, Laura and I have tried to be intentional about those friendships, people who know the best of us and people who know the worst of us. And, they will never, their perspective of us will never change, because before we're anything, we're friends.
Yeah.
And I had John O'Denton on here a few weeks ago, who's one of my best friends.
Awesome.
And we just talked about friends in the furnace and friends in the fire. And I love that, because I think as a leader, if you're a leader listening today, or just anyone, is you've got to be intentional about building those friendships, because again, as leaders, the more you step up, I think the more of a target you become. And I'm not talking about physical target, but you just don't want to be vulnerable. And I know who I am. I know my insecurities.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the biggest maturity steps for any leader, is just identifying your blind spots.
Yeah.
The thing is, you don't know where your blind spots are. You
Yep.
need those friends and people around you and counsel
Yeah.
to help us with that. But you talked about confidence. You talked about, loneliness at the top. Talk to us about leadership identity, because I think some leaders can definitely portray that they are, like you said, the most confident people. But some of the most confident leaders that I know on a platform can be some of the most insecure leaders. And I'm probably talking about myself here. But talk to us a little bit about leadership identity. I know that's one of the things you love to help leaders with.
Yeah, I think it's this. We often have this conversation about where do we find our identity? Like, what's the source of our identity, and where do we look for that? And we're so blessed, because inside the church, like, we know where to look. Right. And I say we know where to look, but we don't always look there. Wow. Right? It's so interesting, right? So knowing who we are in Christ is so important for us. So I would say the first source for us is there, right? Is to look to Jesus first and foremost. And by the way, when we talk about leadership, there is no more perfect example, right? Yeah. In every, like, even previously talking about having people around you, what did, Jesus gathered key people around him, and they were all different, they were all different. But he also sought solitary moments as well. He needed quiet times as well to consider things. Yeah. But in terms of identity, I think it's always important to be aware of the voices that you're listening to.
Good.
So who is who's speaking to you, and are those the voices that you are listening to? Are they serving you, or are they being of disservice to you? And I mean, it could be people around you. It could be the community that you keep. It could be the things that you're listening to on, on. I don't do TikTok, but
Sure.
I know you do.
Yes.
But
I love a bit of TikTok every now and then. Yes.
whether it's social media, whatever it is, but being really aware of. I think the first thing is being really aware of what we're listening to and what we're letting be spoken into our lives, because quite often that's where we find our identity. So from a leadership perspective, it's the same thing. People are listening sometimes to whether I'm a good leader or not a good leader from what they hear from others.
Wow, that's so good. I think it's so true that look, I've always said you're a product of the environment you
Yes.
consistently put yourself in. And that is what you listen to,
Yeah.
what you're watching, the people you surround yourself with. You become the company that you keep.
Yeah.
And I think that's formed so much of your identity. Talk about a child growing up. I think there's things as a child that I probably learnt growing up that I've
Yeah.
had to unlearn when it comes to our identity. Can you talk to us a little bit about learning and unlearning? How do you unlearn? I'm sure do you walk leaders through that? And
We do, and again, the first step is to know what you've learned or what you may have learned along the way, and how you may
to be aware of it.
Yeah, the awareness. So you were saying things that have been spoken into your lives. I remember clearly my daughter coming home one day from school when she was about 7 or 8 years old. And she said, and she came in and she looked downcast, and I said, what's going on? And she said, oh, I can't paint. And I said, what do you mean you can't paint? She said, oh, I can't paint. And I said, why can't you paint? She said, oh, my teacher told me that I'm not good at art.
Wow.
And you could see this was this like defining, could be a defining moment, because she does. She is very creative, and she's gone past that, right? But it could have been a really defining moment in that she could have continued on and said, that's been said to me by someone in authority, so it's the truth. And now I'm not going to do that anymore. So unlearning that is, in the first instance, is to recognize it. And one of the things that we often talk about from a coaching perspective is what you declare over your life is so important. And we say it in church too, it's like what we declare over our lives is so important. So it is in the actual speaking out against that, whatever that may be,
Wow.
So, and I just touch on some things, is that I remember growing up at one stage in my life in my 20s thinking that I wasn't a good person, and it was because of things I was involved in and the people I was hanging around with, and I just thought I'm not really a good person. And you have to interrupt that. You actually have to, at some stage, interrupt that. And then, again, having people around you who sometimes will, and not sometimes, quite often, see the version of you or what's possible in you that you just don't see for yourself is so incredibly valuable and important.
I love that point you said. You have to interrupt that.
100%. Yeah.
Because I think so many times we just learn to live with it.
Yeah.
But you have to intentionally interrupt
Yeah.
those thought patterns, because if you don't, I'm guessing they just become normal.
Yes.
And this is how you think, and this is how I think about myself. And as leaders, as we grow and mature, it's so important that we do keep interrupting thoughts about ourselves.
Yeah.
Whether you're a people pleaser, whether you're I know for me, I grew up thinking I was just a clown, and in some ways I've never lost that, and I hope I never do. But when you start thinking you're just a clown, you don't think you can do anything significant, because you're just the fun guy in the room.
Yeah.
Until one day I had to interrupt and go, hold on, no, God's put something on my life. I've got a voice. I need to, actually do something serious, but not so much serious. But it actually used to I used to just deflect and downplay everything because I'm a class clown.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, whether it's people or either clown, I think we've all got these childhood thoughts.
Yeah.
It's like the Apostle Paul talks about when I I'm going to paraphrase this, but when I grew up, I put away childish things. I left that behind me. But sometimes we grow up and we still act like children in our thinking.
Yeah.
for someone who may be like that, like a people pleaser or a clown, or for what did you say? You said something about how you grew up thinking you weren't good enough.
I wasn't good enough, or I wasn't like, and you collapse that into I'm not good enough, and then it collapses into I'm not a good person, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Or I'm not a good enough person, whatever way you want to describe it, right? And like I said before, it's that a challenge for a lot of people is that they don't even know that is happening in the background.
Wow.
So if you're not aware of it, we say if you're not aware of something, you can't interrupt it.
That's it.
And then a leader will support you in distinguishing that. See, even from a leadership perspective, one of the things that I often say is, if you're an effective leader, then you are an interruption.
Wow.
You're an interruption.
Say
to
that
the
again.
things.
If you're an effective leader.
If you are ineffective, not ineffective.
Yes,
right?
yes.
If you are an effective leader, then you are an interruption for anything that's getting in the way. Like, for distinguishing what's the things that are not working, is you're an interruption to that.
How could you give us a practical way of how do we interrupt these leadership identity thoughts? Look, take the word leadership out of it. How can you interrupt things that can rule your identity? Is there any practical things you can unpack with us today?
Look, some of them are about introducing practices, because if we do physical things, they can interrupt what's going on in your head. Wow. So, for example, getting fit or doing exercise and things like that, they're quite practical things. They can actually start to interrupt the dialogue in your head. But again, I'll go back to the most important one, I think, is the being deliberate and intentional around the people who are in your life and the people who are speaking into your life. If you're in the same environment, it doesn't make any difference really how hard you try to interrupt it. You'll go back to those same people who are saying the same things about you, or keeping, supporting you, keeping the lid on you. That's critical. Is you really want to have a look around you occasionally and discern: are the people in my life, are they really speaking into my life? Are they supporting me? Are they raising me up, or are they pulling me back or holding me down?
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that's so good, because I think sometimes we all go through identity claustrophobia.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's a real thing, but that's sometimes how I can describe environments that you feel claustrophobic in. You're not fully your authentic self because you are just meeting the criteria of what everyone else wants you to be.
Yes.
And so, have you ever heard of that term?
No, I love it. I'm going to steal that one. I'm going to take that one.
Yeah, please do.
I really like that. Yeah, I get it in that in certain environments, it's that you really struggle to be anything other than they expect you to be in that environment, right? So,
and I think leaders can be the worst in that, because it's like, I need to become whatever these, but I think leaders lead the way. You break barriers, you know, all of that sort of leadership. But I can just think of times in my life where it's like identity claustrophobia. I have to, the only way I can describe it, you have to meet everyone else's expectations of who you should be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
that can sometimes be, even though it can be well-meaning, other people's expectations of you can be constraining as well, even though they're well-intentioned, right? So again, look, the awareness part of this is so critical, because again, if you don't know, or you can't see what's going on around you, then it's difficult to interrupt it.
So true.
So, if we find this often, I say in church, right, is having people that you can go to who are going to tell you what's going on as it is. Because we have those friends who will always tell you what you want to hear. They're probably not really going to support you in achieving the things that you want to, or developing yourself, etc. You want someone who can actually, with compassion, point out some of the things that might not be working for you.
Tell you what you need to hear.
Yeah, look, really, and being available to hear those things is a challenge sometimes.
It's so true. I think the first step to solving a problem is admitting there is a problem.
Yeah.
Which is not easy as a leader, because you don't want to hear that there's problems. But I think the Bible talks about that there is wisdom in a multitude of counsel. I think it's not the key's not in a multitude of counsel. So you don't just go and ask every Tom, Dick, and Harry, like, oh, what do you think? What do you think? What's your opinion? But I think you've got to find trusted individuals that have a track record with yourself to go, hey, like, what are these blind spots? Have you noticed something in me? Have you, like, would you say that, having trusted folks in your life?
100%. And I think in church sometimes we're, even though we talk about disciples in church, we're sometimes reluctant to get into the conversation around discipline, right? And so we can often do what I describe as, we can be nice and let things, let things pass, or just, step over things. And that's really not what we're called to do. And I don't mean about the other way around, it being, righteous, like you, I'm going to tell you what you should do and what you've done wrong. But it is actually supporting people around us, because quite often they are blind to it. They don't see. They're ignorant of the fact, and we say they're just not noticing what they're doing or the impact it may be having.
How, in a team and as leaders, how do you give feedback, and what are some things you can help us with today in how to give constructive feedback? Is there feedback and is there opinions, and how do you kind of discern the two? Because I think feedback's important, something you and I have talked about as we're building our teams and our leaders right now and developing them. I've talked to you about I want to have a culture that is not opinionated, but that we're real about some of the feedback. And sometimes people don't have the confidence to feedback, maybe from past history. The last time they did that, they were swatted. But how do we do that in a healthy way that doesn't become an opinionated culture? But it's like, no, the feedback's invited in the context of team and a key team that, are trying to solve things together. Can you give us some practical ways of how do we do this and do it in a healthy way?
I think the first thing is that the most valuable feedback is when it's permission based. So if you go to someone and say, hey, I'm going to give you some feedback about this, without it being, you haven't got permission to actually provide the feedback, it tends to be heard as criticism. Because that's the first one.
This is great.
So the flip side of that would be asking someone, is it okay? Like, I would like to contribute something. Is it okay that I can provide some feedback on that? And then they say yes. Now you're in a permission-based conversation. Completely changes the dynamic around that. So I think that's the first step. The other one would be clearly distinguishing the difference between criticism and critique. So if I turn around and say, critique, we would say critique is what you would use to refine something. So if you're a tennis player, right? You play a bit of tennis? No? Yes?
A little bit. I've got a good forehand on me.
I saw you with a racket in your hand last year. You're definitely better than me, right? So if you want to be a better tennis player, then you would look for critique. You would actually openly go and seek, can you give me some critique? And should I hold a racket differently? Do I need to change, my backswing, or whatever those things would be? You would look for that, right? Whereas criticism, if I say to you, is it okay if I criticize you? The chances are you've already stopped listening.
Wow.
You're not going to listen. So distinguishing the difference between criticism and critique, because the words that might come out of my mouth may be exactly the same, but if you're regarding it as criticism, you're going to discard it or you're going to take it personally. Whereas if you're listening to it as critique, the likelihood is that you're going to look at it as something that's going to support you in improving in that area. So they're real, basic things. We would say they're like the foundational before you actually start to get into it. And then practice it. Go and ask people, is it okay? Or the other side is, you've got permission to give me some feedback on that. I'd really welcome some critique from you or feedback from you.
Yeah, so, because I think, just in some team dynamics, and I'm not even just talking about the team we, currently work with, but in my years of leadership, sometimes people feel like, I can't give feedback because I don't want to bring a negative vibe to the team, and because everyone's positive here, everyone's talking about how great this was and how great that was. So I feel like if I feedback, I might dampen the vibes, but it's like, no, that your feedback's always been invited.
Yes.
And yeah, there's things to identify that are awesome, but we also want to admit there's some things that we need to work on and improve,
Yes.
right? And I think we want to build a culture where we're always improving. We're always trying to, not be unrealistic and not try and
Yeah.
attain perfection. But I think I want to build a team and be a part of a team that's like, what can we do to improve?
Yeah.
But to improve, you need some of that critique, right?
Yes.
You need some of that.
Yes.
Hey, this is what we can work on.
Yeah.
Hey, this Sunday, the way like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think there's a way to do that. How we do it is more important than what we say sometimes.
I think and it's a challenge, I think taking the personal or the personality out of it is also valuable, so that you're critiquing the behavior, or you're giving feedback on the behavior rather than the person. So instead of saying, you were really, you really sung badly, or you really, did, for example, something like that, right? Is say that, the singing, we talk about the actual, the behavior, for example, right? And one of the practices, again, and I think you and I touched on this once, is about, amazing if you have a feedback culture, which is a culture that thrives on feedback, because you need feedback to grow. Like, if you want to grow and develop, you actually do need feedback. And some of the things that we do is introducing consistent practices. So something that Louise and I do from a coaching perspective after workshops, we always check what worked. Not what you did, and it's not you did. We'll just say, like, the lighting worked, the room worked, the engagement worked. It worked when we asked certain types of questions. It worked to be on time, things like that. Then we'll say what didn't work, and it's not an opportunity to complain. Again, it would be, what didn't work was the noise in the background. What didn't work was we didn't have enough pens or markers, or what didn't work was we forgot to bring an extension lead. And then the last question is, what could we do differently next time?
Great.
And it's a real simple kind of process that we introduce. And then when we do it with teams, we say, don't get personal. No need to get personal about it. You don't need to name names in the conversation. So if somebody was late, we would say, what didn't work is being late doesn't work. Rather than, John,
you're late.
John was late. That didn't work. No, it would be being late doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then we would say, going forward, what would work would be for everyone to be here 5 minutes before we kick off, so we're all ready. Yeah.
That's such
Real
a healthy
simple.
way to do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that we can always keep improving on in the sense of, like, yeah, I think as leaders, it's good to hear. I think as a leader, sometimes you're trying to walk that balance of, like, okay, is this just an opinion from someone spectating, or is this feedback where these people are a part of the answer? And it's like, no, we want to help improve. And I think what you've just articulated so well is I think it's a healthy way to do feedback in leadership teams.
Yeah.
What is the name of what you and Louise do? I'm interested. I've actually probably never asked you.
What's the name of the business, or the name of the work that we do?
What is the name of it?
So the business is called Intuit 360.
Nice.
As in, and it looks like, Intuit as in intuition.
Love it.
And one of the things, like, it's an area that we work on, not on intuition, is like developing your awareness and discernment and wisdom, or in different areas around things. So we're supporting leaders in doing that. And 360 is in every area, not just from our work perspective, because when we work with teams or individuals, even when we're working with teams in an organization, we're saying this is for every area of your life. So when you said about being life coaches, yes, we coach around life. We're coaching about every single area of life. So that's the type of work that we do. Wow. So we do a lot of one-on-one coaching. We work with coaches as well. So we work and train coaches, and we run programs and workshops and things like that as well. Yeah.
Love that. All that, and you're also, it feels like you're full-time church volunteers as well. And sometimes I just wonder how you guys do it. But I guess that's why you do what you do, because you have this incredible capacity to help people. And again, we just wanted to say thank you for all that you contribute to help see the church move forward, but also just to see leaders continue to move forward. So it's been great having you on today's episode.
Yeah.
And praying that you and Louise continue just to, move forward in all of those areas when it just comes to helping leads. I think it's so needed. So if you need help, reach out to these guys. Intuit 360.
Intuit 360.
Intuit 360.
Yeah.
But these guys are just, I think they're better people than just being coaches and whatnot. You guys are just good humans. And
Thank you.
I think that's what makes you incredible life coaches.
Leadership.
Sorry, leadership coach. I fought so hard this whole time to get it right.
Yes.
Because John before this said, no, we're leadership coaches. And I was like, leadership coach. Because everyone's a life coach. And I love life coaches.
So good.
But you're a leadership coach. And I did so well until the very end.
The thing you try to avoid, you're always going to bump into.
I know. There's a leadership
Yes.
little thing there right there. So, no, it's been awesome having you. So, thanks
Thank you.
again.
Thank you.
We love you, mate.
Yay. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, and I hope this talk today with John Smallwood blessed you. As I said, like, share, subscribe. Email us at hello@parablechurch.com if something blessed you. Listen, come and join us for a service at 9 Quarry Road. We meet at 10 a.m. We'd love to have you a part of the service. We'll be seeing you very soon. Tune in for the next episode. Parable Essentials.